Once again, from the studios of UNO Television on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, consider this, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
How many people in this society are able to maintain a healthy weight? A third or less. Something's wrong with this picture.
Levels of obesity in the United States have increased in alarming ways. In the 1980s, the Centers for Disease Control began putting together a map showing levels of obesity state by state, and then they went through the years. And every time a state changes colors, it suggests increasing levels of obesity.
When you look at the rates of adult obesity from 1960 until 2008, you can see that the rates were moderate and relatively consistent over time. But then starting in the 1980s, we saw a rapid increase resulting in the current level, which is fully over a third of adult men and women in the United States are obese. But it's the morbid obesity where we've seen the most striking increase from 1988 until 2008.
Fast forward 6 years, and where are we on this issue? Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, obesity. Joining us to talk more about it are Nessie Ferguson, a dietitian, and Ann Knapp, an adult nurse practitioner, both in the Bariatric Center at Nebraska Medicine. Finally, Linda Newman-Potash, here to share her personal journey through weight loss. Thank you all so much for being here and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. And we're going to start with you. How do you define obesity?
Well, the American Medical Association actually declared that obesity is a disease state as recently as 2013. The Obesity Society defines it as the presence of excess adipose tissue or excess fat tissue. We've also got just kind of generally guiding it's a weight that's considered greater than what would be the normal weight for a healthy individual. We use body mass index, which is a screening tool to get a better idea of where an individual would fall on that range. 25 or greater on the body mass index is overweight, whereas 30 and greater is obese. And then there's scales going up from that that would consider different classes of obesity as well.
Yeah, so Nessie, we hear quite a bit about this BMI, right?
Yes.
Lots of times in passing, like we're hearing right now. So really kind of go more in depth, since that seems to be the foundational piece. Tell us a little bit more about what that is and why it's so important for us to know.
Sure. Well, as Annie mentioned, it's a screening tool, so it's an easy way to take your height and your weight, and from that, they calculate a number, and that number would indicate whether you have a healthy weight or whether you're becoming obese, or further down the the chart that you would glance at. And the charts are always color coded so people can kind of see right away where they fit into it, because they can look at their weight in pounds and their height, and they can kind of just, it's a nice visual, and it's a quick and easy way for adults to use, and for the health practitioner to kind of show that person that as they would increase in their weight, then what would happen is that those weight-related diseases, they become at risk for those.
Okay.
So that is kind of how it works.
And the trends are unbelievable.
Unbelievable, correct.
Let's take a look at the graphic, and if all three of you want to chime in, that would be fantastic in terms of what we're seeing over time.
Yes. And I think that from the beginning of our program that they showed that the color. So you see Nebraska right in the middle there, that we were a lighter color back in 1994, and then you see in 2010 we've gone from yellow to a deep red, which indicates that our obesity rate has climbed, and therefore along with that on the bottom you'll see diabetes trending along with that, so that we had less diabetes in 1994, and now we have a greater percentage of diabetes because it is type 2 related to weight as one of the risk factors for developing that disease. So that is why healthcare professionals are so interested in making sure everyone knows what their BMI is, and then with that giving the interventions that can help so that we can maybe prevent the disease that are coming up, and if not, control the ones that you do have.
Yeah, and
Yes.
we're doing a lot in terms of visuals and painting a picture in terms of what's on the outside. And Linda, I guess just curiously, as someone who's been through this, tell us what's going on the inside of our bodies when we talk about obesity.
There's so much going on. You know, you look at the outside and all you see is someone that's overweight and heavy, but on the inside, I know for myself, I had very resistant high blood pressure where I was on 8 different medications before surgery. I had high cholesterol I was taking medications for, and I was taking them in my 20s. I had pretty severe arthritis. I needed an ankle replacement, you know, all kinds of things that I shouldn't have at that age, but that were directly related to, you know, the obesity. And then looking at the fact that we have diabetes in my family on both sides. I didn't have it yet, but that was where I was going.
Yeah. And a lot of head nods there, because typically what tends to happen is that weight increases, the unnecessary weight increases. We do run into problems just like Linda has explained. Tell us more about that.
Right, so you know, we've got plenty of data out there that shows that as the obesity rate rises, as a person's BMI rises, as well as other factors like genetics, or also with even an elevated waist circumference that we're correlating to this. But your risk of diabetes raises. We saw that on the graphic. In addition to that, you know, fatty liver is very common, and that leads to cirrhosis. We've got sleep apnea, we've got hypertension, high cholesterol, just down the line. And even outside of those big major diseases that you hear of, it's also every body system. You get more headaches. Reproductive system is affected, especially for younger women. Problems with infertility, problems with polycystic ovary syndrome. Just down the line, there's not a body system that is not affected by obesity.
And I'm going to ask you something here. You've mentioned an awful lot of challenges that we tend to face. Chronic illnesses. You know, once you have a chronic illness, you're going to live with that now in one way, shape, or form for the rest of your life. Pick a couple of the things that you mentioned and paint even a more vivid picture for us. When we hear the word diabetes, for example, we hear that all the time. But like BMI, what is that? What does that mean we're headed towards? So if you want to just pick a couple of things and maybe elaborate on those.
Well, you know, my vast experience has been more with the endocrinologic diseases, so diabetes is near and dear to my heart. Prediabetes is starting at we're seeing a lot more prediabetes than we ever did before. You know, as that develops, you know, you start with oral medications, you kind of move on to needing more and more and more medications. As you become more insulin resistant, you have a host of other hormonal problems and issues that can happen. You know, you can trend more towards needing insulin at some point to keep those blood sugars under control. You know, as your diabetes worsens, you're at higher risk for microvascular complications like diabetic retinopathy, kidney disease, diabetic nephropathy, neuropathy, numbness and tingling in the lower extremities. But again, it can affect many systems rather than just a high blood sugar.
And let me ask you this too. Once that ball starts rolling down the hill, I'm visualizing here, does it become something that goes at a quicker rate? In other words, it's just something that you can't, it's like a train, and once it starts, it's just really, really hard for somebody who's going through that to stop.
Right. Well, and you know, for someone who is maybe trending on the prediabetes, diabetes range, also with their obesity, you know, perhaps they have high blood pressure. That high blood pressure coupled with that diabetes is going to put them at higher risk for kidney disease and end-stage, you know, renal disease. That progresses. Very much all interrelated.
Okay. And Nessie's pulled some props, so that tells me that she's wanting to maybe add on to something.
I just wanted to point out that when you spoke to Linda about what were the what's going on the inside, one thing that sort of helps to visualize that is that as our bodies gain more fat, this is a pound of fat, and that pound of fat burns about 2 calories a day. And this is a pound of muscle, and this pound of muscle burns about 20 to 30 pounds a day. So if your body contains more fat than it does lean body mass, then you know you're kind of idling. Your engine isn't going very fast, and you're more or less very good at storing food, the calories that you take in, versus burning them. So our goal then is to kind of decrease this storage of fat and increase the way that we can, you know, have an energy balance so that we have more energy. And it also shows that someone who begins to lose weight, they can take the stairs and they're not so out of breath because they're not carrying around 5 of these. You just carry around Christmas packages and for a day and see how your shoulder feels after you do that and how tired you are. So it just goes, it's all part of it. So it's our energy balance. We want to, people feel better, and that helps to keep going with it.
Okay.
But that's where you get into the cycling is, you know what you need to do as a patient, and you need to lose weight, you need to exercise more, but your health conditions are getting worse and worse. And how do you exercise when your joints hurt so bad? Or who wants to put on a bathing suit to get in the pool, which is the only place you can exercise when you're, things like that. So you know what you should do, but you can't. It cycles and combines, and it gets out of control, and it's really not always, part of it was my fault, but at the same time, I didn't know how to break that cycle.
Okay, so before we talk about how you were able to successfully do that, let's back it up a little bit, Linda, if you would, for us, and walk us through your journey, because I think often those of us on the outside looking in see a picture and we think, oh my gosh, how did that happen, right? You lived how that happened. So if you could just kind of maybe take us back a little ways and tell us when things started kind of taking a turn for the not so great.
I was pretty athletic all the way through high school. I have a connective tissue disease that I was born with that I didn't know. And at the time, I thought I was special because my joints would do things that others couldn't. I was very flexible. But maintaining a very strong muscle mass really helped that through high school. Then got into college, got less active, got more into school, got into non-athletic areas, started to gain weight. Started to put on more fat, therefore I didn't have the muscle to hold my ligaments together like they had been through high school. And it just kind of started there, and every year I gained more and more weight, became less and less active, not because I wanted to. The athlete in me really missed being that active, but I just couldn't, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And progressively too, I got to the point where my BMI was over 44. Which is well into the morbidly obese.
We have a few photographs, and I want to put those up for our viewers. These are before pictures of Linda. And as we're looking at the photograph, we're all going to see different things here. But Linda, what is it that you see when you look at these photographs?
Even though I'm kind of smiling in there, I see a sadness behind the smile. That it was more of I have to appear in public like I'm fine and everything's good. Kind of hiding the pain that was on the inside, both the emotional and the physical. And same thing there. And if you notice, I'm always trying to hide behind something or, not out in the open. You wouldn't see a picture of me by myself. I'm kind of trying to, even though she's a little girl, I'm trying to hide behind her so you can't really see what's going on.
I'm a big believer in that whole phrase, walking a mile in somebody's shoes. And I think, again, when we look at a photograph like that, we're all thinking something different. Linda, what is important for those of us on the outside looking into a photo like that? What is important for us to remember above all else?
That we're human beings and we have feelings, and obesity, people think that they can walk up to somebody and just say, you're fat, or if you didn't buy that kind of stuff or eat that way, you wouldn't have a weight problem. We're blamed for our obesity, where you could take somebody, that would look like me and say, oh, you have arthritis and you're on all these blood pressure medications because you're fat, but you could have somebody with a normal BMI that's not blamed on it yet could have the same health problems. So it's just realizing that we're all human beings, we have feelings, we have concerns, and at least for me, I didn't want to be that way. And I don't think I saw myself as that heavy. I knew I was overweight, I definitely knew I was obese, but it's kind of scary sometimes to look back at those pictures, and I was like that for a number of years.
And realizing that you are seeing the stairs, and that does impact you in a certain way. And when you go home at night, what are you thinking? I mean, again, help us out here in terms of, we don't do it to be mean or anything. It's just a double take, and that double take means so many different things to different people.
Right, and I don't think people say it to be mean. It's just a shock or realizing. And it was hard going home at the end of the day and being physically exhausted and being emotionally exhausted. And it's completely different now. I don't feel that physical and emotional, but at the same time, I still kind of see myself as a heavy person and not always you know, I realize I'm not that heavy anymore, but I still see the flaws in stuff. But even though I feel great about losing the weight and keeping it off for 11 years now, a little over 11 years, but it's, some of that's still there, and the you know, I wonder, am I going to go into a bathroom and be able to fit into an airline bathroom kind of thing, or am I going to be able to fit between the coffee table and the couch? Things that most people take for granted, I still wonder, because you don't want to, I'm like, am I going to get stuck?
That's so, and that is an interesting thing for her to bring up, that even though we see her as she is today, she's still mentally
her body image.
Back there with her body image.
Yeah.
Well, and there's one important point that, you know, I want to make when I'm hearing you speak to. It's, you know, we have this public perception out there that, you know, well, this person is fat, or they're, you know, they're obese because they're going home and they're eating ho-hos and, you know, they don't ever exercise. But what you're not seeing is that there's hormonal changes, there's physiologic changes in obesity, where, you know, as somebody starts to lose weight, their hunger hormones increase, their fullness hormones go down. You know, your body is sabotaging you against that. You have joints that hurt, you have joints that are, you know, disjointed. And, you know, whereas, you know, a surgeon may look at a person who's of a healthy weight and say, all right, let's go fix that, you know, that knee pain. Somebody that's obese walks into an office and they may face, well, you just need to lose weight, it'll be better. You know, a lot of times it's, the weight is blamed for their problems, whereas, you know, we need to look at it more like a disease.
Yeah, and I think too, as I was preparing this program, I was thinking of all the costs that are associated with this. And when you're talking, I'm thinking, my gosh, the expense. You know, we've talked about the psychological piece of it and some other things, but the financial piece of that, to keep this whole thing up, and then to go into the doctor's office more often and have to have more prescriptions and things like that, that's very costly.
Yes, it is.
And I had an ankle injury that I walked basically on my ankle being obese for 17 years because I needed a ankle replacement. And I knew, and every healthcare professional I saw said, you know, you're looking at an 80–90% failure rate because of your weight. And, you know, but you look in the cost of the, you know, 8 different blood pressure medications, and they were huge. I wore braces on my legs actually to walk for a number of years, things like that. Were all costly, physical therapy, but it was always kind of that underlying, I felt like I wasn't treated, although I was never mistreated by healthcare professionals, I felt like subconsciously I was going to be blamed for all the weight problems that I had.
Well, let's go from problems to solutions. I want to know that turning point for you. When did you turn the corner and say, enough is enough, and we're going to do something about it?
It was in 2003, and I got to the point where I had to do something with my ankle. I was on pain medication, still trying to work, not only for my ankle, but the rest of my joints and everything. And I said, I have to do something. I had looked into surgery a little bit, but I wasn't ready at that point. I said to myself, surgery is an option, it's a tool, but I need to make sure I can make these changes for the rest of my life. So I actually spent 6 months before that. It was way before the insurance required you to do physician supervised weight loss. And I trained for a marathon. But it was the Los Angeles Marathon, and I did it in a wheelchair that you pedal. So I still had to do all the work, and I did the training, and so I trained probably from December. It's a little easier in California, the weather's a little warmer, till the marathon, which was in April. And I trained, I think the most mileage I got to was like 10 miles, and then I'm very stubborn, so I said, okay, I'm going to have to rely on the other 13 miles. It's just going to have to be if people tell me I can't do it, I have to prove them wrong. And that, I think, was the big turning point for me. It was probably the longest 7 hours, 55 minutes, and 45 seconds of my life.
Not that you're tracking it.
Not that I tracked it, or not that I don't look at it. But it showed me that I was willing to make a change. And I lost about 40 pounds in that time period. And most of my training, because of my joint problems, I did in the pool. And I had to get over the fact. And I realized that, you know what? Nobody was looking at how I looked in a bathing suit, because everybody else, even if you're 90 pounds, you're subconscious of how you look in a bathing suit. So once I got over that, all my training was pretty much in the pool, walking in the pool, and then learning how to run, and then I was ready for surgery.
So I'm curious, just briefly tell us about this surgery.
Initially, it was back in 2003 when I met with the surgeon in California. He said to me, you know, because of your connective tissue disease, the only thing we can offer you is an adjustable gastric band. And I jumped at the chance because at least, you know, he said, we don't have experience with your disease, but we're willing to try if you're willing to try. And so I went and I had the gastric band. I had already shown them that I could lose weight and I was motivated to make changes. And I think that helped too. Had I just gone in and not done anything, they may not have been willing to risk that much. Yeah. And so I had the band, and then I moved to Nebraska a year later. And at the time, my body did not like the band, and it was because of the connective tissue disease, but I was terrified that if the doctors out here took the band out, that I would gain the weight back, that I needed that strong tool. And I went through all kinds of complications with it. Dr. McBride at Nebraska Medicine upsized the band twice to see if we could get it with a larger size to work better. And then finally, in 2008, I said, the sleeve gastrectomy was just kind of starting to get a little more popular, and I said, we just need to convert to, you know, you can take the band out, but I need some tool. So she did the sleeve gastrectomy, and I have been able to maintain my weight. It's not a magic tool, nothing is. I've had to work hard at it, but it's a way of life. I don't think about it anymore. I've incorporated when I eat a little bit more, I move more, you know, kind of thing. But exercise is still a big part of my life. And although, you know, I still have the joint problems, I had a very successful ankle fusion 9 years ago after losing weight. I still do primarily most of my exercises in the pool. But I feel like an athlete again.
Yeah, that's, well, congratulations.
That's the neat part.
And one of the things I think as Linda is speaking and inspiring so many. Okay, so now we'll have people who are watching or who will know somebody as they're watching thinking, okay, I want to be like Linda. So I'm going to go do the surgery and then I'm going to get this done. But you said a lot of really good things in there. I really thought it through. I thought about what's going to happen afterwards and what I was going to need to do to maintain. So build on that for us, Ann, and talk about what's important to remember when we do pick an avenue for a solution.
Sure. Well, Linda hit the nail on the head. Bariatric surgery is our strongest tool that we have for weight loss. In order, preliminary qualifications are morbid obesity with a BMI of 40 or greater, or if somebody has a BMI of 35 or greater and they've got a presence of one of those big major medical comorbidities that are related to weight, that would be your type 2 diabetes, your high blood pressure, your hyperlipidemia, reflux, or some severe sleep apnea, then you could also be considered for that. But it's important that you're going through a multidisciplinary program where, you know, it's not a magic fix. You have to fix those lifestyle things before, or you won't be successful afterwards. You know, our program involves dietary support. We've got dietitians that work extensively with patients before surgery, as well as psychological support as well. Typically, and insurance will drive things too. You know, some insurances do not cover bariatric surgery at all. So, aside from that, you know, there are people who, you know, surgery is just maybe not appropriate for them, or, you know, maybe they haven't gotten to that level of obesity yet. And, you know, before then, the lifestyle changes are the absolute pillar. You know, we use a lot of meal replacements when we talk about non-surgical avenues. So, incorporating protein shakes or protein bars into a diet, as well as, you know, medications may be appropriate for some people, obesity medications. It's a new field. So, you know, our obesity medications are fairly limited still at this point, and insurance coverage tends to be an issue. But, you know, it is certainly a tool where you're not getting where you need to be with those lifestyle changes.
Okay, and Nessie, certainly what we're hearing here is slow and steady wins the race. We want to kind of take off out of the chute and do everything quickly, and then if we're not thinking about maintaining, a high percentage of this goes back to where we were, right?
That's correct. And as everyone has already said, there's the reducing phase and then there's the maintenance phase. But I have to say, I think in our center, and for myself as a dietitian, it's just such an honor and a privilege to work with people and see the inspiration that happens on their weight loss journey. And because of that, we keep that going, and research tells us that, you know, if people still stay together, we do a lot of group support, and we do a lot of structured meal plans, and because of all that, I think that, you know, I'm very positive, and we are all so sure that this is going to work, and so we just encourage, and everyone has that as their goal, to keep that lifestyle change, whatever you're doing, and you know, if you're not happy while you're if you're not a happy person, losing weight may not make you happier. Right. So those types of things aren't part of what we're saying, but we're just saying you'll be a healthy person.
Yeah, and it's very difficult around the holidays, as we all know. Some of us push that off. Well, the majority of us push that off until the new year. But you brought a few props. We have just a couple of minutes remaining. So pick maybe what you think is the most important there for us to remember here as we head into the holidays.
Okay. Well, I think for sure if you're planning on something, going to some social event in the evening, so that you want to remember that in the morning, as Annie already mentioned, maybe have a protein shake and maybe put some berries in there, because then you've got some fiber from a healthy food source, and you've also got that balance with the protein to help with that satiety. And the research tells us that if you do that earlier in the day, that it can help with the cravings later on. Okay. So those types of things versus just grabbing a glass of juice and running. So a lot of it is mindful, how much we're paying attention to what we're eating. And so I also brought some visuals to show. So if you're having a drink, maybe this is just a can of pop. That's how much sugar is in a can of pop.
I don't even want to look at that.
And then if you do something like, so maybe you want some water, or maybe you want some flavored type waters or something of that nature, but you want to be thinking about how much sugar is going in. And if you have a piece of apple pie and ice cream, this is how much sugar, this is the pie, and there's the ice cream on top of it.
I'm just going to guess, Nessie, but I think people would prefer to hear from Linda in our final 30 seconds in terms of what's inspiring. So inspire us, Linda. I mean, this is jolting, so bring us back.
I would hope that in the future that more insurance coverage for weight loss and weight loss surgery, because in the end, my health care costs are so much less than they are. I'm costing the insurance company less money now, but they haven't caught on to that. And just, you can do it. It's the best thing I ever did. It's hard work, but it's so worth it. And I am so much healthier now than I was 11 years ago when I started this journey, yet I'm 11 years older. So
congratulations from all of us watching, and we want to put up the graphics so that if people want more information, they can go to this website. So let's do that for our viewers. It's nebraskamed.com, Bariatrics Center, 800-922-0000 or 402-559-9500. Ladies, thank you so much for being here with us today. And again, Linda, congratulations.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Best wishes moving forward to all of you.
Thank you very much.
And happy holidays.
You too.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.